In this episode, we're going to bridge a gap that frustrates a lot of beginners, which is the gap between understanding an intrusion model and knowing what to do with it. It can feel satisfying to learn the kill chain, the diamond, and other frameworks, because they make complex attacks feel more organized. Then the next question hits. So what? And how does this help a defender on a real day with real alerts and real constraints? The answer is that models are only valuable when they translate into guidance that changes behavior, and that guidance has to be specific enough to act on but broad enough to apply across different intrusions. Turning models into defender guidance means converting a conceptual picture into decisions about what to monitor, what to block, what to verify, and what to prioritize. It also means packaging that guidance in a form that another person can use without needing to read your mind. The goal here is to show you how to do that translation in a disciplined, repeatable way. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A helpful starting point is to define what defender guidance really is, because it is not simply a summary of what happened. Defender guidance is a set of recommendations that shape defensive actions, such as where to focus detection, what behaviors to treat as high risk, what assets to protect first, and what evidence to collect early. Good guidance also includes context about confidence and scope, because defenders need to know whether they should respond narrowly or broadly. When guidance is done well, it answers the questions that come up in the middle of work, like what should I look for next and what should I do if I find it. When guidance is done poorly, it becomes a list of interesting facts, such as malware family names, that does not lead to improved defense. Beginners sometimes confuse detail with usefulness, but usefulness is measured by how it changes decisions. Your job is to turn model-driven understanding into decision-driven support. One way to make this translation practical is to treat each model as a generator of questions that defenders must be able to answer. The kill chain helps you ask, where are we in the progression, what stages are confirmed, and what stages are still unknown. The diamond helps you ask, what capability is being used, what infrastructure is enabling it, who is being targeted, and what adversary behaviors seem consistent. Each question can be translated into guidance that tells defenders what to look for in their environment. For example, if the kill chain suggests the intrusion likely includes persistence, guidance may include focusing on behaviors associated with persistence rather than only the initial infection artifact. If the diamond suggests shared infrastructure across victims, guidance may include monitoring for those infrastructure touchpoints across the enterprise. The model is doing its job when it helps you choose where to look and what to value. A common beginner mistake is producing guidance that is too abstract, like improve monitoring or increase awareness, because it sounds safe but does not help anyone act. To avoid that, you can anchor guidance in observable behaviors instead of labels. For instance, instead of saying this is a campaign using a certain malware family, you can describe that the adversary tends to establish outbound connections at a regular interval to unfamiliar destinations and creates a new scheduled task shortly after initial execution. Those are observations that defenders can map to telemetry. Instead of saying the attacker used lateral movement, you can specify that the intrusion involved unusual remote execution patterns and unexpected administrative access between systems that normally do not communicate. This kind of language turns abstract ideas into something that can be hunted and detected. It also makes your guidance more resilient, because behavior remains useful even if the attacker changes file names, hashes, or infrastructure. In other words, behavior-based guidance travels better than indicator-only guidance. Another key part of turning models into guidance is selecting the level of specificity that matches the audience. A frontline analyst might need a tight description of what to look for immediately, such as an unusual authentication pattern and a specific type of process behavior. A detection engineer might need a clearer mapping to classes of signals that can be turned into detection logic, such as suspicious child process relationships or anomalous network destinations for a given asset type. A responder might need guidance on sequencing, such as what evidence to preserve before isolating a host. A leader might need a short explanation of impact and why certain actions are being recommended. The models help you support all these needs because they provide structure for what matters, but you still have to translate that structure into the right form. The best guidance is not one size fits all. It is consistent at the core, but tailored in presentation. The model is the anchor that keeps those different messages aligned. You can also turn models into guidance by tying each stage or vertex to a defensive control point, meaning a place where defenders can observe or interrupt the intrusion. In kill chain thinking, early stages map to controls that reduce delivery and exploitation, such as email protections, vulnerability management, and safer defaults. Mid-stages map to controls that detect execution and prevent persistence, such as host monitoring and privilege limits. Later stages map to controls that disrupt command and control and prevent actions on objectives, such as outbound control and monitoring for data access anomalies. In diamond thinking, capability maps to behavioral detections and hardening against techniques, infrastructure maps to network controls and monitoring, victim maps to asset prioritization and segmentation, and adversary maps to pattern-based anticipation and hunting. When you make these mappings explicit, you naturally produce guidance like focus monitoring here, block here, verify here, and harden here. This is how models become operational, because they point you to concrete leverage points. Guidance also has to consider prioritization, because defenders cannot chase everything. Models help you prioritize by clarifying what would be most damaging and what is most likely to be active right now. If the kill chain suggests you are in a late stage, guidance might prioritize protecting sensitive data paths and preventing exfiltration rather than spending all effort on how the initial email looked. If the diamond suggests the capability includes credential theft, guidance might prioritize identity monitoring and privilege review because that changes the attacker's power. If the victim context suggests a critical service is in scope, guidance might prioritize containment actions that protect that service even if it causes short-term inconvenience. Prioritization is guidance because it tells defenders where to spend time first. When you produce guidance without prioritization, you force defenders to guess what matters, which is exactly what you are trying to avoid. Another subtle but important piece is using models to communicate confidence and uncertainty in a way that defenders can still act on. Defenders often need to act before certainty exists, and good guidance respects that reality. You can say that evidence supports a confirmed capability behavior on a specific host and suggests possible lateral movement, but you have limited visibility into certain logs. That statement can lead to guidance like expand monitoring to a broader set of systems while you validate the suspected movement pathway. It can also lead to guidance like preserve certain logs because they are needed to increase confidence. Models help here because they give you named places for uncertainty, such as missing kill chain stages or incomplete diamond vertices. When you communicate uncertainty in a structured way, defenders can respond proportionally instead of either overreacting or dismissing. The point is not to be hesitant. It is to be honest in a way that still supports action. Turning models into guidance also means creating guidance that survives adversary change, because attackers adapt. If your guidance relies entirely on infrastructure indicators, it may become stale quickly, because infrastructure is easy to rotate. If your guidance relies only on one malware artifact, it will break when the payload is repacked. Model-driven guidance should emphasize behaviors and relationships that are more stable, such as recurring capability patterns, common privilege escalation pathways, or repeated victim targeting. It should also include guidance for what to do when indicators shift, such as watch for new outbound destinations that share the same behavioral rhythm, or monitor for the same sequence of host actions even if the network indicator changes. This is where the idea of blending models becomes valuable, because you can use the kill chain to define a sequence to watch for and the diamond to define the relationships to watch for. The result is guidance that is harder for the adversary to evade with cosmetic changes. You should also think about how to make guidance actionable without becoming tool-specific, because defenders need concepts that apply across different environments. Tool-specific instructions can exclude some listeners and can make guidance feel like a recipe instead of a strategy. Instead of naming specific products or commands, you can talk about categories of telemetry and categories of controls. You can describe endpoint visibility, authentication logs, network flow data, and system configuration records without assuming a particular platform. You can describe actions like isolate, restrict, monitor, and preserve without telling someone exactly which button to click. This approach keeps the episode aligned to beginner learning while still producing real Defender value. The models help because they naturally map to these categories, such as stage-based monitoring and vertex-based linkage. You are teaching people to think in portable defensive concepts rather than to memorize a single environment. A final ingredient is feedback, because guidance is not finished when you deliver it. It is finished when it is used and refined. Models can help you define what feedback should look like by tying outcomes to stages and vertices. If guidance was meant to detect persistence behaviors, feedback can include whether those behaviors were found and whether they were true positives. If guidance was meant to prevent lateral movement, feedback can include whether new authentication patterns were observed after containment actions. If guidance was meant to reduce exposure of a victim category, feedback can include whether similar assets remain exposed. When defenders feed results back, you can adjust the model-driven story and update guidance accordingly. This loop is what turns intelligence into an improving system rather than a one-time report. Beginners often think intelligence is a finished product, but the reality is that it is a process of iteration guided by evidence and outcomes. As we wrap up, turning abstract models into Defender guidance is about translation, not decoration. You use models like the kill chain and the diamond to organize evidence, identify what is missing, and understand relationships, and then you convert that understanding into behavioral guidance, prioritized actions, and confidence-aware recommendations. You choose language that is observable, portable, and useful to the people doing the work, and you avoid relying solely on fragile indicators that attackers can change overnight. You also tailor guidance to the audience without changing the underlying truth, using the models as the anchor that keeps messages consistent. Finally, you build in feedback so the guidance improves as defenders use it and learn more. If you can do this reliably, your analysis stops being a description of badness and becomes a tool that makes defense better, which is exactly what threat intelligence is supposed to accomplish.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.